Hello, and welcome to Cloud Insiders, the podcast that brings cloud down to earth. For this episode, Xtravirt CEO Gavin Jolliffe and myself, Stuart Robinson, travelled to the VMware UK head offices to speak to Ian Jenkins, the Director of Networking and Security for the UK and Ireland, to talk about software-defined networking, or SDN, network virtualization and all things VMware NSX. We discuss how NSX came about, its development and what it does, where it's going, with business insights from both a services delivery point of view and from the view of the creators themselves. The conversation starts with Gavin Jolliffe talking about Xtravirt's experience of NSX adoption, starting with a look back to what was happening in 2014. Without further ado, let's jump straight in.
So Xtravirt as a business really grappled with NSX in 2014, and at that time was concepts. What is SDN? What does it mean to you? You know, why do you do that? And we worked with a number of mid-sized businesses who were trialing the technology, seeing how it could add benefits. But what we're seeing now is large enterprises. We've seen that last mile step that VMware's taken because the product has matured so much and has developed so much in that time, where we're seeing predominantly larger businesses adopt it strategically, not just tactical or fixing another problem. Yeah. You know, have you seen that journey develop yourselves?
Yeah, so funnily enough, the timeline's around the same for me. So I joined VMware in mid 2014, and it was very much a kind of single use case lead to the market, which was around microsegmentation, because it was something that could be done that couldn't be done before. You know, we were talking to large banks, and the ability to microsegment every workload would have cost them tens and tens of millions. But it was a single kind of use case at that point. We were going forwards with the answer rather than asking the question. But it was good because you're right, the invent of network virtualization or SDN, it meant a lot of different things to different people. It was a bit like cloud. When cloud first came out, what is a cloud? What was SDN? And as you can still see today in the marketplace, that, you know, multiple vendors have got multiple different takes on SDN, I guess. I think NSX is more of a network virtualization. If you think about what we do, historically we had the hypervisor, and we virtualized the workloads on servers. We essentially do the same. We provide a hypervisor across the network. So it doesn't matter whether you're running a brand spanking new spine leaf network, or whether you're running a traditional kind of 3-tier network that's 15 years old and out of support. You know, we can run over the top of it. It doesn't really matter. So the benefit for us of being able to either sit in a greenfield environment or over a brownfield site, those are the things that have started to kind of help the rate of adoption, because actually there aren't many inhibitors to moving towards network virtualization. From the
point of view of the timeline as we've been talking about, and the kind of the entry, the point of which NSX started gaining attraction in the market, the challenges that it was solving then versus the challenges or the opportunities for gain now, how have they changed in your mind?
As I said before, I mean, I think we were leading with trying to solve a security pain, but it was a security pain that many customers didn't really acknowledge or know was there. I think we were ahead of the game in that respect. But when you're trying to sell a solution to somebody that maybe doesn't acknowledge it's there or doesn't see that threat, then it's very challenging. I think those threats are very much prominent today. So, you know, cybersecurity is a huge risk to many organisations, and it's not just the threat of being fined. It's not just the threat of losing critical data. It's actually the brand reputation that goes with it. We recently did some research with Forbes, and jointly with Forbes, and we found that 76% of business leaders and security practitioners found that their security solutions were somewhat outdated. Yet the majority of them have spent money on new tools in the last 12 months. So I think security is still very much a hot topic in terms of, and very prominent today with the risk in the market generally around cyber attacks. I think often as well we use the saying that it used to be the big eating the small, and now it's the fast eating the slow, and a lot of the slow are the big kind of monolithic organisations that of the past. So you find a lot of the newer financial services organisations that don't have the legacy that they're having to carry with them, that are able to change and be a lot more dynamic and on the fly.
Just touching back on the security aspect, one thing for the listeners they may not have heard is the message that Pat Gelsinger, VMware's CEO, has been talking about over the last year or two in terms of this consolidation of networking tools. How have you seen businesses adapt to that, or is this still a journey that businesses have to go on?
I think largely it's still a journey that businesses are having to go on today. If you revert back to the point I made a moment ago, that 42% of organisations are saying they need to or have spent money on new IT tooling in the last 12 months, that's usually an add-on. It's usually the tip of the iceberg in terms of what they're trying to do. They're either trying to remedy something or they're trying to address something that they see as an immediate threat. What Pat Gelsinger is talking about and what VMware, often the network and security business unit, talking about is around the Goldilocks zone, that ideal location between being able to sit between context and isolation. And for me, I really believe it's about changing the way in which we design security from the ground up rather than bolting it on afterwards. I think fundamentally that's where organisations need to now change, is that security needs to be ingrained in the design and the building of new applications. I go back a number of years ago, the term DevOps was a lot more prevalent then. DevOps was kind of highlighting that security is a pain in the neck, right? Security is getting in my way. I can't develop because of this security. But it was when you started to introduce the security controls that the application started to falter and have challenges and so on and so forth, whether it be performance or access or whatever. And I think now if we design and provide cloud platforms with NSX, with security built in, then those organisations are building their applications in real time. They're building them in a cloud native fashion with security ingrained from the beginning. It just makes it a lot smoother to move those applications then through its life cycle into production.
And for me, that's a really interesting story, the paradigm shift that requires businesses to look at security in a completely different way. As you said before, what was done 10, 20 years ago, the same model, the same mode still largely prevails. Do you see that as a barrier to taking advantage of NSX fully, or how do you work with those security leaders in order to open that world up?
I think you're right. I don't think we're ever going to get away from the perimeter. Okay, I have spoken to customers who believe they can get rid of their perimeter and run it all with NSX. But you look historically, our access to data was north-south, and that's pretty much all it was, client-server access. And we've moved now to a world where we're traversing the network for different applications, whether we're in HR or payroll or what have you, we're having to traverse the network. And the volume of east-west traffic is increased enormously. So I don't think we'll ever get away from perimeter firewall. Or even maybe an internet-based perimeter, because we need that tough exterior. But it's about now, it's how we protect the crown jewels inside, how to protect the soft, gooey middle, and the best way to do that, in my opinion, is with NSX.
And there's an analogy which describes this really well, and we use it with our customers when they're trying to grapple with NSX. There's the hotel versus castle mentality.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's completely accurate, hotel and castle. I mean, we still use that today. It was a term a colleague and I kind of came up with when we were trying to explain microsegmentation, going back a few years now. It is a really simplistic way to look at it, but if you open the drawbridge and you go through into the castle grounds, you've got free reign to kind of roam around and kill and do whatever you want to do. When that drawbridge is up, it's protected, but they're still throwing their arrows over the top. They're doing whatever it may be. Whereas with a hotel, yes, you can enter legitimately through the front entrance, but after that, your access is kind of locked down. And we see that today in all modern offices. We're here in the VMware offices today, and it's the same thing. You can't got to have a badge access to get into certain areas, and I think that's where customers need to start thinking about their security design.
And this hardening of the interior is great, it's an additional benefit, but to maximise that benefit, they've got to look at what they're doing today and see how they can peel back this duplication and this complexity of administration and management that comes with that traditional approach.
Yeah, and I think also it's remembering that threats are not just external, they're from within as well. So having a generic access point for all employees to come in, but then to be able to access every single system, you just wouldn't do that. So yeah, that's why we have controls like Active Directory to give us access, controlled access, but there's still the ability to propagate. And how do you protect against people that are legitimately able to access certain systems, but taking data, sensitive data, and leaking that outside the organisation? And that's where the virtual cloud networks wider portfolio, NSX, App Defense, the advanced load balancing with AVI, VeloCloud, all these kind of things could all seam together, all tie together to provide a very secure infrastructure, whether you're in remote sites, in the headquarters, whether you're working in a coffee shop, whatever it may be. We've got to really think about security from every access, but it is about the user experience these days as well. That's going to be the key behind all security, is make sure that those users can get access to the data they need in a timely fashion, but without compromise to the organisation.
For organisations that have seen the rise in NSX but haven't yet adopted, the journey has been quite fast, and it seems to be accelerating right now with VMware's focus on NSX. Can you tell us a little bit about the move from NSX-V to NSX-T and explain a little bit of what that was about?
Sure. So I guess a bit of history, really. I mean, so as I say, I joined VMware in May 2014, and we had NSX-V, and we also had a product called MH, Multi-Hypervisor. The Multi-Hypervisor product was the kind of original Nicira product. So that was the acquisition that took place 12 months before. And big belief is that NSX is Nicira. It's kind of not. There are definitely parts of Nicira in NSX, but NSX-V was essentially VMware's networking security product. Okay, the T transition today is where we've really built the entire platform with that kind of openness in mind. The NSX-V was built for the vSphere environment. It was embedded within vSphere and so on. Now we're not using the VDS and things like that. We're using Open vSwitch and things like that with NSX-T. So NSX-T is truly harnessing the full power of Nicira acquisition, but also it's a combination with that of NSX-V that we built before. So we've seen a big journey over the last 12, 18 months with NSX-T coming up to feature parity with NSX-V.
And that's fascinating. A lot of people won't necessarily know those nuances, and that drives a lot of insight.
With NSX-V going end of life in 2021, is there going to be anything to help migrate from V to T?
Yeah, so the business unit are working on a number of tools to help with that migration. It is a different platform, so there are changes that need to be done. There are ways and means to do it today. So working with our services organisation, with yourselves, we can help with those migrations certainly today, but we are looking to make that whole migration piece as smooth as possible. The key thing around V to T is understanding that it's going to provide customers a lot more going forwards.
Yeah.
As we talked about containerization, talked about cloud native applications and so on and so forth, I think we understand that the mobility of workloads is what's driving this, and that's truly what NSX-T is bringing, is that true hybridity in terms of where the workload is, what it's located on and where, and so on and so forth.
In terms of NSX and its progression, a lot of customers might look at VMware in terms of the development of the hypervisor into the private cloud and the integration and now the aggregator of the multi-cloud. Is that what we see with NSX as well? The universal ubiquitous aggregator?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for me, NSX is a platform. It's not a piece of software, it's the platform that glues all of those together. For me, if you're looking at whether it's a on-premise piece of infrastructure or whether it's a on-premise private cloud, hybrid cloud, full public cloud, that extensibility, the ongoing security controls across that, the flow of data, the move of workloads, it needs to be seamless, and that's the bit that NSX really glues together. So I think NSX has become that foundational part of what VMware is about. It's become the new ESX of VMware. It is our root of what's going to be made possible.
And that creates a much broader central proposition with all the parts that VMware has. This naturally means that you sit on an interesting dividing line between being an integrator and an open API, but obviously encroaching into traditional areas. How do you find that balance with the traditional market?
I think it's still very interesting when you talk to networking teams, security teams. Quite interestingly, when I meet with customers, they're still very much divided. The security teams very much are wanting this new way of working. And some of the networking teams, they either love it or they hate it. It's a bit like Marmite for them, right? They're either traditional networking approach, and that's how they have built it, and that's how they'll continue to build it, and that's how they like to control it. Some have allegiances to other vendors, other technologies that they built careers around, and that's what gives them comfort in what they're doing and the ability to deliver. So with the traditional networking, we see that divide between security and networking. Security very much like us, we're a new way of doing things. We do provide an alternative. We enable them to build it in earlier. With the networking teams, it comes down to what are the pressures they're under, I think, these days. What it is they're trying to deliver. I think the more that customers come onto private cloud, hybrid cloud, extensibility, they realise that they can't do that with traditional networking. It's just not possible.
I thought you made a great point around the organisational structure adaptations, because you've got this traditional networking as one of the last bastions, that didn't necessarily get fully rolled into that generational change when NSX came along. You had storage and compute and applications and networking and there was a real consolidation and a new set of skills emerging from the marketplace. Have you seen customers adapt their organisational structures to allow the networking teams to integrate better?
Yes, we have. Yeah, there are still a number of organisations that run within their silos of security, networking, compute, etc. I think the invent of converged infrastructure and then now hyper-converged, I think more so with hyper-converged we're seeing that, and the drive towards providing private cloud. So yes, we have seen teams start to develop a cloud team or a more general infrastructure team, but with it, certainly we're seeing that the networking teams are becoming more and more important in terms of how the delivery of apps is going to be brought forward in the future.
And I guess we see that adaptation and some of the reflections that customers are taking once they've adapted it and found perhaps these new conflicts within their organisation balanced against the ability to increase their scalability and their agility, as we talked about a little bit before.
I mean, I think also it's broader as well, that IT, largely due to things like the amount of cyber attacks and things like that, we're starting to see how intrinsic IT is to business. How important is delivering IT and the services to its employees, to the business, for it to achieve its business outcomes. And I think that's the dynamic that's really kind of moved the needle, not just for networking, but for hyper-converged and for VMware as a general, is that customers are seeing that to deliver business outcomes, IT needs to be there with it.
Agreed. NSX as a enabler to cloud and multi-cloud as that's developed, and this drive to be that aggregated central management function of a new model. Where to for NSX now? We've seen a number of new releases from VMworld. Can you give us a bit of a high level in terms of where you see NSX going at the moment?
NSX is available both in a cloud-based form and also on-premise format. Okay, so that is the general direction, is towards being able to provide customers the ability to consume everything via SaaS. It's where the majority or a lot of business applications these days are being consumed from. You look at things like Salesforce and so on and so forth. Critical applications are delivered on a SaaS-based platform. With the network needing to be essentially fluid in its location, then that needs to be, the NSX needs to be fluid in its location as well. It needs to enable customers to be portable, essentially. So to consume NSX, whether it be within VMC on AWS, whether it be on IBM Cloud, or whether it be with one of the more recent announcements like Google, NSX is built into those infrastructures. Okay, and having NSX on premise enables customers to then provide that extensibility. Okay, it's about true mobility of workloads, and I think for me that's pretty much the direction of travel, is to be able to provide customers with ubiquitous security, network policy, no matter where the workload is located.
We talked a little bit about the acquisitions. Are you comfortable talking about any of the acquisitions and the functionality that's being bought into the portfolio?
I'm not. Essentially, Avi Networks was acquisition that provides us with more enhanced load balancing. Okay, so NSX has always had its own load balancing in, but it's critically important for the performance of applications and businesses to be able to have that ability to load balance. Avi is a great acquisition because it creates a lot of similarities between NSX and themselves. So it's a separated data plane and control plane, right, in the same way NSX is. So rather than having physical devices sat on site, so a comparison would be something like an F5, for example, where you're having to buy pairs of load balancers and active, passive, and so on and so forth, and that hardware requires and updates and so on and so forth. Avi is very much cloud-based, so it's all SaaS-based offering. So a moment ago we were talking about SaaS-based, where's the direction of travel? It's around SaaS, and that for us is where that's going to come in. So Avi provides us a really unique opportunity to enhance our capabilities and provide alternative ways of consuming that for our customers.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's really good. I'm interested in containerization. We've seen a drive from VMware around Kubernetes, PKS, and we're going back to the agility, enhancing agility. And we're now doing a lot of work in terms of enabling those development teams to stand up environments even more rapidly than previous. Can you tell us a little bit about how NSX is having an impact on that side now?
Yeah, I think I'm not a cloud native expert by any means, but what we're seeing from an NSBU perspective is that customers are no longer looking at containers in isolation. They're looking at running containers in a virtualized environment because there are benefits to doing so in terms of performance. Where that assists with NSX is the ability to secure that, because the security constraints are kind of magnetized with containers, right? When you've got shared infrastructure, shared resources, it becomes even more important to have security at the kind of core of that. And for me, that's where NSX is really going to play a part in containerization going forward. And we are built into a lot of platform as a service, where we've got organisations and customers such as Fidelity, for example, that have got their platform as a service built on with NSX underpinning.
And this is a really interesting. Again, it's a change in dynamic and paradigm. So, rather than security being the wraparound or the afterthought, developers are designing with security built in now as effectively where we're seeing the drive.
It's akin to the times we talked earlier on about DevOps, right? I mean, rather than spinning up a bit of server and storage, we're now using as a service, and they want it now, but we have to make sure that is secure.
And it doesn't become a barrier then, because it's integrated and the continual release cycle is not impacted with traditional ways of applying that afterwards. That's good. That's good. Really good point. So part of this conversation is around looking at where the market adoption is. We understand, having done dozens and dozens and dozens of NSX implementations over the last 5 years, that we're well beyond early adoption. And as we're seeing now, large enterprises baking it into technology transformations and digital transformations. From your point of view, Ian, how have you seen that adoption across the market in broad terms now?
I think absolutely spot on in terms of the adoption. For me, it's becoming the mainstream with customers. We're no longer just talking about the possibilities, we're talking about the realities of what they're needing. And what we're seeing is that more and more organisations that would fall into what we'd possibly classify as critical national infrastructure. And for me, that's very varied. Okay, so critical national infrastructure can be everything from the likes of Vodafone running 4G, 5G networks over technology such as NSX. It would be the MOD. It would be the British Army. It would be the blue light services. It would be healthcare and so on and so forth. These are critical parts of our infrastructure. If our telephone network goes down, we're stuck. But if Vodafone are providing the telephone infrastructure or the communication network for blue light service, that's even more critical than whether or not I can place a phone call this afternoon or not. So I think that for me has been the real turning point in terms of where we're seeing this now. We are seeing NSX being installed into water companies, electricity companies. We're working with the NCSC. So we work very closely with the NCSC within my team. And we've built a fantastic relationship with those guys that talk about the need for physical versus logical separation, for example. And they're fully behind logical separation, which is where NSX really provides that. And if you look historically, things like the MOD or the Army would have had different classifications of data, okay? And some of those data levels would have had to have been kept separate by physical air gaps. We're able to mitigate that. The business case for that is less infrastructure, less cost, easier to run, easier to manage, and inherently more secure. So, we're able to provide isolation and firewalling between every workload. Inherently, it's more secure than it has been previously, and we've had that directly from the British Army as well, to say that when they've pen tested it, they found it's more secure than traditional approaches.
I think what we've seen is this maturity of the product grow, and the adoption by these critical services is really that reaching of critical mass, and the confidence that comes with that for other businesses who have been waiting and watching has really gone through now.
Yeah, and we've really turned a page in terms of the acceleration around NSX in particular, but really the whole virtual cloud network. Because if you're familiar with the virtual cloud network, it's now, through all the acquisitions we've made, it's not just NSX anymore. We've got vRealize Network Insight was an acquisition of Arkin. We've got the Avi Networks acquisition, which now gives us the NSX Advanced Load Balancer. The portfolio has really kind of expanded. It's more than just NSX these days.
That's great. So we've got the confidence that both government organisations and large enterprises have now adopted the technology and are gaining the benefits from it. When you're talking to customers for the first time, are there any sort of points or helpful hints that you can give them in terms of how to approach applying SD into their perhaps traditional environment? So there's any standard common starter points that you would...
I think you make an interesting point there. We are working with the government, we're working with large organisations, but we're also working with a lot of small and medium organisations. And I think historically the view was that it wasn't for them. But as we've said a couple of times in this, it's the fast eating the slow now. And a lot of those smaller organisations are a lot more agile. I think a lot of the use cases, whether you're a large organisation or a smaller organisation, the challenges that these companies are facing are very much the same. It's just a matter of scale that's the difference. So really it's about working with each of those clients on an individual basis, understanding what their pain points are, trying to roll it back to the overarching objective, with it be a business objective or an IT objective that's driving this change, and working with them to do that. Security is still very much a big driver today for a lot of organisations, but a lot of it is about re-architecting with the future in mind. So a lot of these organisations are saying, we could do what we've done before, but now it's time to do something different. We need to transform. If we just replace like for like, but with the newer version, are we transforming? No. How do we transform our business? How do we become more agile? How do we become quicker? How do we become inherently more secure? How do we provide a better quality of service for our employees, for our customers, and so on and so forth? And that's how we're talking about customers, about how we transform.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. From our own experiences, starting with the business objective, the business outcome, and understanding the journey with which they have to go on to achieve that and measure that is massively important. The great conversation is around, technology provides new opportunity, and with that opportunity, it's still got to be mapped back to the use cases, the outcomes. And I think SDN's been a great driver for reviewing the way that businesses have approached security and networking and the agility that their development teams have needed. So I see this as still very much an evolving market, still much a very developing market. I'm interested in terms of those who have made the leap and have started adopting and bringing it through into their business. Are there any points that you would highlight to those businesses in terms of how they would get the most out of it? How do they achieve all the benefits? We've moved beyond concept, and we're now into how do we tease out all of those benefits to help that business move forward? Are there any common points that you see coming up?
I think working between organisations like ourselves, right, Xtravirt and VMware, during that sales process of understanding the customer and designing the solutions to full implementation, whether a customer chooses to do some of the implementation themselves or whether they're looking for implementation services, but certainly within the design, how do we map the use cases and the desired outcomes, business outcomes, to the technology? How does technology truly become the enabler rather than just another project? A lot of organisations historically have had tens, hundreds of projects, and most of them either fail or never get off the ground. What we're finding with customers that adopt NSX is where they work with ourselves and with our services partners is that they're able to do so much more in terms of realising value. And I think that's the key is how quickly can we realise the value? And what we're finding as well is that most customers that have gone ahead and with NSX and deployed once will expand those environments.
And I think you've touched on the kind of the critical point there. Adopting a new networking and security model is not a project. It's a life cycle, and continual improvement beyond the initial design and implementation is key. And we see that. And interestingly, I see that's driving a lot of technology infrastructure these days. More and more, where we're coming back and continually working with those companies to get more and more agility or cost saving or consolidation.
The entire environment is constantly moving. These environments are no longer static. You don't wire a network port once and that's it, and you forget about it for the next 5 years. I guess theoretically you do, but the network needs to be a lot more dynamic now. It needs to be a lot more involved in the application, a lot more involved in the workload of data. How do organisations cope with peak periods? We need to make sure we're working with our customers to help them design to achieve either those challenges that they're facing or the goals that their objectives are.
Agreed. Challenges don't go away, they just evolve.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you very much. It was a great discussion.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Cloud Insiders. If you'd like to get in contact with the guest from today's show, you can contact Ian via email on ijenkins@vmware.com or via his Twitter @JNKS1980. You can get hold of Gavin via his Twitter, which is @GavinJolliffe. That's GavinJolliffe. And despite my near silence in this episode, if you want to contact me, you can find me @CI_Stu. If you'd like to get in contact with the team, have an idea, or would like to feature in an episode of Cloud Insiders, feel free to drop us an email at team@cloudinsiders.fm or drop us a message on our Twitter, that's @CloudInsiders. Want to listen to more episodes? You can find them on cloudinsiders.fm, iTunes, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. We're now on Spotify, SoundCloud, and have all our episodes on YouTube. Just search Cloud Insiders and we'll be there.